All right, well, first off, I want to say thank you so much, Myles, for having me. My name is Brooklyn. I'm a University of Calgary student, and I want to say that, I love Alberta. It's a beautiful province, but I have some questions for you, especially as a young person. And so if it's okay if I start off with first, graduating university in the next couple months, I know myself and some of my fellow peers, we have some concerns about our future, the opportunities, if there's a chance to have and raise a family. Mm-hmm. So I really want to begin asking you, how is Alberta doing right now?
Well, I think Alberta's doing very well. It doesn't mean that we don't have challenges and there are not issues that we have to resolve, but if you compare Alberta with the rest of Canada, we have the fastest employment growth. 40% of all new jobs in Alberta or in Canada over the last year were created here in Alberta. Wow. These are private sector jobs. And so from that perspective, we're doing well. We have the lowest taxes in the country. We have a flow of investment that's coming that's certainly outpacing the rest of Canada up to this point in terms of what's happening in the last couple of years. And so I think we're very well positioned to continue to receive investment, which means more jobs and more tax revenues. But we do have some challenges. Mm-hmm. One of the challenges has been is that because we are so attractive relative to the rest of Canada, we've been having an inflow of population that is unsurpassed in our history. So 200,000 additional people come to this province over the last year. And of course, that brings some challenges, both in terms of our public services like healthcare and education, trying to keep up to this major impact in population. And of course, our unemployment rate, given all these new employees or potential employees that have come to our province, is now a little bit higher. But that's not because there hasn't been job creation. It's because the population has outpaced the increase in job creation. Okay. And so now things are looking very well. Now we have a situation right now, and I'm sure we're going to talk a little bit more about this later, but we have a lot of uncertainty at this point in time, particularly. It looks like there's going to be a new federal leader of government, in federal government, and that causes some uncertainty as to what kind of policies we can expect going forward. There will be another election, certainly before October, but perhaps as soon as the spring. And then we add to this issue of what's going on internationally. And of course, the big issue of the day is the incoming President of the United States, Mr. Trump, and some of the policies that he has been talking about and how that may impact Canada generally and Alberta specifically. So we have some concerns. We're at a point where we need to be very careful and diligent, but things have been going really well. There's been a lot of momentum and things that can continue depending on how some of these other issues play out over the next couple weeks and couple months. So, but like I said, investment is flowing into the province. Jobs are being created. And we are trying to respond to some of the concerns about, like I said, the population growth and inflation that we receive. There's a number of issues I'll go into more specifically that we have to deal with.
Yeah, that's great. And you know what? Thank you so much for letting me know about this, because there's so much information provided from different sources of the media. So it's good to really have an official in the government give me some answers. So I'm thinking now that I want to go down to some more specific topics, and some of them you hinted at. But maybe let's start right off with healthcare. This is a big topic, especially not only in Canada, but Alberta. So what has the government of Alberta done for healthcare in the past couple of years? Okay.
Well, healthcare is in my view, the single most important issue that we have in terms of, certainly of social policies. Now, I think one thing to keep in mind, we have a lot of challenges there. One of the things I think that I think it's important to recognize that Canada generally, and Alberta certainly specifically, spends more per capita on healthcare than any other Western industrialized jurisdiction other than the United States on a per capita basis. Wow. But we're really not getting the results that is commensurate with the amount of money that we're putting into it. There's other jurisdictions, certainly in Europe, that are able to have a healthcare system that gets better results for less money per capita. And so while I think we have a good healthcare system, it needs to be better. And I don't think we're getting value for the amount of money spent. And this is, like I said, this is not just Alberta, this is Canada generally. The problems that we have today, things like shortage of doctors and nurses and other medical practitioners, long wait lists, these types of issues are not just Alberta specific. It's a Canadian specific problem, and it's actually an industrialized world specific problem. Part of it is demographics. We have an aging population. The baby boomers are now moving to the retirement age, have already started, at least for the older baby boomers. And that means more demands on our healthcare system, because as you get older, there tends to be more healthcare issues. At the same time, all the baby boomer doctors and nurses are retiring. And then added to that, we have a strong population increase that is coming from people from other parts of Canada and other parts of the world. And so we're trying to deal with that challenge, as are many other provinces, but more specifically Alberta, because our population increase is faster than the rest of Canada in terms of a percentage basis. So there's that issue. It's new technologies that are costing the system more. We have to find a way to deliver our healthcare services more efficiently with higher degree of productivity. Part of trying to do that is the recognition that our healthcare system, which is primarily through AHS, Alberta Health Services, which is 40% of our overall government spending in the province, is not being as productive as I think it can be, as it should be. And so we're doing a restructuring, and we're trying to break it into more, call it digestible pieces, where people, or those different divisions can focus more specifically on areas. So we're divided AHS, if you will, into a healthcare system where AHS will be responsible for hospitals, active care.
Okay.
Primary care will become a government department, where we focus on primary care, and that's family doctors and that type of thing, public health. Then continuing care, which is taking care of the people who require assistance in their older age, primarily. That needs much more focus, much more attention, and so that's being divided into another government department that will be focused on that. And then finally, mental health and drug addiction, which have been exploding as an issue over the last few years. And the government has put a big increase in funding in, but we still have much more work to do. So this restructuring, I know many people are uncomfortable with change, and there are many people concerned about how this is going to manifest itself. But from my understanding of things, and as the MLA here in Calgary Fish Creek, the intent is to find productivity, to be more efficient, to get more from the money that we're spending. We will continue to have to increase funding into healthcare. That's not a debate, if no other reason, because of the increase in population and inflationary pressures that we receive. But the question is, are we being the most effective with those dollars, and can we do things better? And to that, we do not look to the United States, by the way, for that type of initiative. I don't think the US system is a system that we want to emulate at all. I don't think any of my colleagues feel that way. But what we do want to do is look at other jurisdictions, many of them in Europe, that are getting better healthcare results for the money spent. And so those things will be, as part of the restructuring, I'll be looking at initiatives that will give us that type of insight and changes to make the system better.
Wow, that's really interesting information, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe I've seen some of the information before on the Government of Alberta's website. So if people like my age or younger or older want to find this information, it is relatively easy to find through the Government of Alberta website.
Yeah, and I'm very sympathetic to people who are watching what's going on, because it's a very complex issue and there's a lot of moving parts to it. And there can be a lot of different narratives or things out there in the public sphere about what's been going on or what are the motivations for what goes on. My assessment is the only motivation is trying to get a better healthcare system that is affordable. And how do we make things better? And so again, yes, I highly recommend that anybody have any questions to come talk to myself as an MLA or others. But the website you pointed out has a lot of information, and hopefully people will feel a little bit more comfortable with the direction we're taking.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Myles. I think we can all agree that we just want something better, especially for healthcare. So moving now to another hot topic, education. What has the government of Alberta done in the past year to help with the challenges inside the classrooms, but also outside the classrooms?
Yeah. So again, we have a little bit of understanding of what is the problem, what is going on. So a couple of years ago, when you talk to the school boards and their submissions to Alberta government, they were talking about flat student growth or even declining. There was more talk about closing schools than opening schools at that time. Everything has changed over the last couple of years. So I mentioned earlier about the 200,000 people increase in Alberta over the last year. And a lot of those people are students. And a lot of those people are students with complex needs, because we have a lot of people coming to Alberta from other jurisdictions where the children are dealing with, English being a second language, or they've had trauma from where the country they came from. In addition to that, we see in the classroom more ADHD, more autism, complexity, what we call complexity in the classroom. So big, huge increase in the last 2 years in the number of students that we're having to deal with that was unexpected, and then higher complexity within the classroom as well. So this has been a very difficult issue for the school system to deal with, certainly the teachers having to deal with these situation of increased classrooms and more complexity within the classroom. So what have we been doing? Well, we just announced $8.6 billion initiative to build 90 new schools in the next 3 years.
Wow.
That's unheard of growth, and certainly from this province, and certainly I think in Canada. In addition, we have increased funding for education. I think we need to do more. And so I would expect that, and I would hope that in the upcoming budget that the government will respond to that. We have increased in funding. We have been hiring more teachers, more education assistants, but it has not kept up with the growth that we've experienced. So this unexpected growth. So we have to, we understand that. I understand the government understands that. And they have responded somewhat, but more needs to be done as well.
Okay. It's good to hear that the government of Alberta does understand that these are significant challenges, and that the government has and is willing to keep responding. So that's good to hear. Now, going off on education, but a little bit more just to a specific relation with it, charter schools. That's another discussion that I keep hearing on the media, and I want to know the government of Alberta stance when it comes to charter schools and what's going on.
Yeah, I think the issue primarily is not so much charter schools, which are public schools.
Okay.
Is the question of private schools. So Alberta has a significant number of private schools. About 7% of our total of our kids are being educated either in private schools or at homeschooling. And so, does the Alberta government support these type of schools? And we do. But I think it's important to recognize that it's nothing that we're doing in supporting private schools takes away in any way from what the support that's given in public schools.
Okay.
In fact, it leaves us more money to support public schools. Because why? Because we only provide 70% of the funding to private schools that we provide to public schools. So every student whose parents decide that they're going to send their child to a private school is actually saving the government money that we can apply to other government priorities. The other thing we don't do is we don't fund the capital building of the private schools. So again, another area where the Alberta government actually saves money if that happens. Now, the other misconception that needs to be addressed is some kind of view that all private schools belong to the wealthy and elite and things like that, and that's just not the case. It exists, but actually a very large portion of private schools are focused on children with special education needs.
Oh, okay.
And so parents feel that they have to go to a special institution where those needs can be met. They don't find it for a variety of reasons in the public school system. And so it gets addressed in a private school where the government funds 70% of what they would fund that student for a public school, and they're able to get the specific requirements. I also like to think that I'm a big supporter of public schools. I was educated in public schools. My son was educated in public schools. My mother was a public school teacher. My wife is a public school teacher. So it's not by any ways that I wish to not support public schools. I'm a big supporter. Mm-hmm. However, I believe in competition. I believe that it's good to have different systems, different organizations trying to do the same thing and innovating, finding ways to do things better, and that all the learning that we get from that type of interaction can be used in our public school system later. So I don't think that private schools, if handled correctly, detracts in any way from a public school system. We want a good, strong public school system. We want the best possible public school system. Some parents will want to choose to send their child to a private care. We provide some support for that, but they're not. It's a situation where they help each other in a way. Because if you believe in competition as I do, it's what's good for the private sector in terms of the businesses, and we want competition because it makes it better. You get better products, more efficiency, etc. The same influences can exist in the school system to make everything better. Of course, all for the benefit of not only the students, but the parents and the teachers themselves that have options.
Wow. Well, you know what? That's a lot of information that I had no idea about concerning private schools. So thank you for clearing up that conversation there. And so now I want to turn right down to the city of Calgary. The Greenline. That is something that is a very, very big topic that you see a lot in the media. Are you able to provide an update on the Greenline from the government of Alberta?
Sure, I think I can. So, many of my constituents may not be aware, but the Premier did appoint myself as one of the 3 provincial members on the Greenline committee.
Oh, wow.
So we have 3 members from City Council, including the Mayor, and 3 people from the province, including the Premier. Listen, the Greenline began as a concept in 2015, where at that time the city approached the provincial government and the federal government proposing a $4.5 billion line that would go 47 kilometers from one northern extreme of Calgary to Seaton in the south. And that was supposed to provide 29 stations going through downtown at a cost of $4.5 billion. As time has gone on, it's become clearly apparent that that particular project was nowhere close to what the budget was. That is to say, I think most people would agree right now who look at this, to do that original project would cost well over $20 billion. And so there's not $20 billion available. So the city has been evolving the project as we go along. The line has been getting shorter and the number of stations getting less, and the cost has been going up. So the latest city proposal was for $6.2 billion for a 10-kilometer line with only 7 stations that would go from Eau Claire to Linwood. And if you look at a map at what that design would do, it calls into question how many people would actually ride a line like that. Where's the value? Where's the utility in a line that short going to those locations? So what the province done is said, look, let us take another look at this. Let's look at some of the assumptions that have been used in the design. And is there a way that we come up with, at the similar cost, with a line that can do more? And that generally means extending longer to an area where it could serve the constituents of Calgary. And so we proposed a project design that instead of going from Eau Claire to Linwood would go from 7th Avenue downtown to Shepherd.
Okay.
And we think, that means a lot more passengers. And so the city is now evaluating that proposal and that design and that work. We'll be hearing from them soon whether they wish to proceed with that type of project. It means that we're not tunneling underneath downtown, which is a big costly component of the previous city's design. We will be on top of the ground in the air in downtown primarily. But that cost saving allows us to extend the line. So again, it's not that the province is trying to not do the Green Line, it's just that it needed to say, look at, for the amount of money we're spending and the amount of passengers that we see that would be served by the shorter line that the city had previously planned, we think we need to do better. And so we put out a design, we put out the costing, the city is looking at that right now, and hopefully we'll hear soon whether or not they wish to proceed with the project.
Okay, well, thank you for providing that update about the Green Line. I want to switch it over now again to something that, not only in Calgary, but all over Alberta, that seems to be another hot topic, the initiation of thinking about an APP versus a CPP. And so what is the status of the federal government's reporting to Alberta regarding the value of Alberta's share of Canada's pension plan?
Okay. Well, first of all, from my personal perspective on the whole question, I don't actually have a strong position whether Alberta should do an Alberta pension plan or not, because we don't actually have accurate information yet to determine what is the circumstance of, say, the Alberta's portion of the Canada pension plan.
Okay.
So Premier Kenney initiated a study to look at an assessment of what is the Alberta portion of that fund. We had the government had previously asked the federal government for that information and was refused, the same way when they approached the Canada pension plan. And so a study was contracted to do that with professional fund, actuarial experts who can look at the information and data that's available and come to a view. That study came out last year, and it indicated that in that study that the value of the Canada pension plan that is assignable to Alberta's portion was about 53% of the fund. And for 12% of the population, that's quite noteworthy. Now, of course, there's been much debate. Is that an accurate number? Is that a valid number? And so there was a meeting of provincial finance ministers and the federal finance minister to look at this question, and it was agreed by all parties that the federal government should provide Alberta and all Canadians an assessment as to what would be Alberta's portion of that fund. And that was promised to be done before Christmas. Now, it didn't happen, but what we did get, the federal government had tasked the Chief Actuary of Canada to look at this question, and they came out with an announcement recently that talked about the methodology for making the calculation. So the methodology is incorporated into the Canada Pension Plan Act, but there is some room for interpretation as to how this calculation should be made. It appears that the methodology that the actuary talked about might suggest that the number to Alberta would be less than the 53%, but certainly well above the 12%. And some economists like Trevor Tome talks about maybe between 20 and 25%. But we still don't know because they didn't provide that information. And given what's going on within the federal government right now, and finance minister has resigned from that position, there's a lot of uncertainty. So my view is, okay, we're still waiting for the information. We should not and cannot be making a decision. We certainly can't go to Albertans and ask them to make a decision on this until we have information, the appropriate information. So my interest is, let's get the information and then we can look at it and assess it. But right now we don't have that number yet. Okay,
so Alberta is waiting currently for the federal government to give that number.
Exactly.
So hopefully there'll be another update soon you can provide in the next coming months. Now, for any sort of pension plan, you need workers. And for workers, you need people in a population. We know that Alberta has had a significant, as you've said before, increase in population. So what currently is the government of Alberta doing and plans to potentially do in the future to help with this increase in population?
Well, I think there's a couple things we could do, and we already see that happening. I mean, there is a need to say, look at, we all want immigration, we need immigration, but we perhaps need to be a little bit more strategic and a little bit more prudent in the numbers that we have, and perhaps a little bit more specific as to what kind of people, what kind of skills, work skills, etc., are most likely to be successful here and make a contribution to both Canada and Alberta. So that seems to be, federal government has put in new restrictions on the numbers of temporary workers and other immigrants, and that will probably have a significant impact. What we're doing with the population that we've received as well, we have to expand our healthcare system, we have to expand our education system, and we need to create jobs for all the people that have come here. And so like I said before, 40% of all private sector jobs in Canada the last year are created here in Alberta. So we're doing well from that regard. I think we need to continue to do that. We need to attract investment. We need to provide the environment where people want to invest here, which creates the jobs. And so let's focus on that. There's a lot of things that we have to do as part of that. We have to make sure our population has the right education and skills for the jobs of today and tomorrow. So we need to invest into that. We need to maintain a tax environment that attracts investment. And we need to focus on some of the regulatory systems that exist here that make it difficult for companies to decide to invest here. So these are all priorities that we need to work on. I think we have been working on. We've been getting a lot of interest. There's been a lot of announcements recently about investments going on, whether it's the $10 billion Dow chemical plant north of Edmonton, Port Saskatchewan, or some artificial intelligence, AI data centers that have been talked about being located here. We have certain competitive advantages here in Alberta. We must rely on our sustainable competitive advantages and leverage off those if we want to create long-term good jobs. And one of the things we have is energy. And so we need to make sure that the environment exists where we can leverage and exploit that advantage. Our low taxes that the oil and gas sector is enables for our province is another thing that attracts investment. It allows us to diversify into other areas, and so that's the kind of focus we need to do. Make it attractive for investment to come here, for companies to locate here, to create jobs here, to pay taxes here. And a lot of our issues will be resolved. We have, like I said, then there's on the other side, increase our housing. We have the fastest growing housing in Canada right now. Rents are coming down in Calgary faster than any place else in Canada as a result of this increased supply. So that's good news for people looking to get into a home. We need to adjust and expand our education and healthcare capacity as well. So these are all things that kind of do.
Okay, awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Now, all right, so I want to piggyback, Myles, off of your answer to your last question.
Okay.
You mentioned some key words like sustainability and the environment. And this really brings me to the conversation that's been arising around the water resource management. There's been a lot of discussion on that. And so I'm kind of curious if you're able to provide an overview of what is the province doing with respect to water resource management in Alberta.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's a very good question, and water is critical. I'm actually reminded by a speech I heard over 20-some years ago by ex-premier Peter Lougheed was speaking, and where he predicted that water would become and would surpass oil and gas as the most valuable strategic resource in Alberta.
Wow.
Now, whether or not that's today or sometime in the future, or one can debate this issue, but water is important. And we have historically in Alberta had a very important competitive advantage is that we had reasonable access to water. However, there are things that are changing. We have population increase in Alberta. We have increase in the agricultural sector, which is the single largest user of water right now. We have increased industrial needs for water, and the environment is changing. And for example, glaciers are receding, which has an impact as to when the water comes available and flows. And we have, frankly, what's happening right now is much of the water that we have access just flows through the province of Alberta in the spring when we have access. And then we sometimes, particularly in southern Alberta, have a shortage of water when we get to late summer and early fall. So, we have to be looking at this. Obviously, wildlife conservation, biodiversity, all these things also come into, in fact, we want to be good stewards of our water. So I passed a motion, my first motion as an MLA last year, where I called on the government to do an overall an assessment of our inventory of water in the province and needs for the future and what we need to do to be able to confront those challenges that have come. So the province is doing that. They're doing this kind of a study. It will take some time to do. In the meantime, we've taken a direct effort. We're spending over almost $1 billion on trying to increase the efficiency of the irrigation system here in Alberta. That work is underway. Like I said before, the biggest challenge for water today is probably in the southern part of our province. And so I think we need to be looking at how we're managing that, the amount of reservoirs, and what other things that we can be doing to conserve water, to be more efficient with our water use. Hopefully we can come up with, we continue to have certain elements of solutions being incorporated into the system, but we have more to do. And this is a priority. This has to be a priority for the government, and it's certainly my personal priority.
Okay, well, that's really good to know. Water being something that we all need, and something that is the only way, really, the Earth can keep going on and sustain all biodiversity.
That's right.
So another priority that people assume the Alberta government is taking is in relation to their salaries. And I'm hoping, Myles, that this is something you can answer. Why was there a wage increase for all MLAs done by the Alberta government?
Okay. Well, I think, first of all, let's be clear. The increase for this year is 2.2% for MLA salaries, which is the same as what the increase is going to be for the public service sector, public service.
Okay.
It's not just UCP MLAs that will get this increase, it's all MLAs. But it's also important to recognize that there hasn't been an increase in many years in Alberta. And so, certainly MLA salaries have declined relative to inflation over the last some years. What is the appropriate rate increase, or how should MLAs be evaluated? It's a good question. I think a lot of people, I think whatever that is, I think most people would agree that it should be reasonable for the work and experience and others that people bring to the table. We want people to be fairly remunerated, not just MLAs, but everyone. And so the decision was made by a committee to increase by 2.2%. The other thing I think is important to recognize, because there's a lot of misconceptions that I hear in our office, is, first of all, MLAs do not get pensions.
Really?
So a lot of people are going to be surprised at, because there are many other, in fact, we're the only province where MLAs do not get a pension.
Wow.
And so keep that in mind when you're making those assessments. One added change that recently happened was was severance package. So what happens when an MLA ceases to be an MLA, whether they just quit, resign, or not elected in the following election? We had been the only jurisdiction in Canada that had nothing. There was zero. And so the day after you're no longer an MLA, you're not allowed to work for the government for a year, but you get no severance package, no transition allowance. And so that changed. So now they've incorporated 1 month of pay for every year that you serve as an MLA, which is the lowest, up to a maximum of 6 months. which is the lowest in the province.
Oh.
And sorry, lowest in the country.
Oh, wow.
So I think, I knew when I ran for office what the remuneration package was, and I chose to do so. But I think I recognized that as somebody that decided to go into public service at near the end of my career, I have the financial flexibility to do that. But we want to make sure that everybody with young families or other can consider the idea that they could become an MLA and be fully remunerated. That's what I think is happening. I think the level is reasonable. Certainly, people can weigh in on debate that issue, but I don't think that we can say that our remuneration here in Alberta is in excess of, certainly relative to other jurisdictions in Canada.
Wow. Okay. Well, thank you for clearing that up. I mean, especially we didn't know, at least myself, that it hasn't been done in years, an increase. And I mean, there was thought going into it, especially with people who have families. And I mean, I think affordability and wages is a very, very big topic for not only Albertans, but all of Canadians.
Yes.
And this now kind of does lead into the major question that I think a lot of people have today, given what is going on with our other trade partner, the USA.
Oh boy.
And so, first of all, I want to start by asking you the conversation that's going around the Premier of Alberta, going to Mar-a-Lago and having a conversation with the incoming President of the United States. Can you share your thoughts on that?
Okay. Well, this, like I said, this is a personal thought. I know there's a lot of debate on that in our country today. In my previous career, I've been involved in a lot of negotiations in the private sector and significant large negotiations. And I've always found that if there is a spirit of mutual respect and a friendly vibe between the partners, it makes negotiations go much smoother. And so I think the fact that the Premier was invited down to Mar-a-Lago to have that interaction, and that she was able to, in a polite and tone of mutual respect, to make the position that putting tariffs on Canadian exports into the United States is not in the best interests of our American friends. That we have mutual benefits from the current system, and that we should be very careful about what kind of things are considered by the U.S. administration, or even as a reaction by Canadians as to what we should be doing with that. I personally believe that that Mr. Trump has a set of objectives. And I don't believe that his objective is to destroy the mutually beneficial trade relationship between our two countries. And so, anyways, she's taken this advantage to inform the president and people around him of our position and of what we think is mutually beneficial. And I think that's a good thing.
So there is a major topic going on right now to start off 2025. And I was hoping you could share your thoughts, Myles, on the recent meeting that happened with the Prime Minister and the Premiers. And specifically, Premier Smith, we heard that her attendance was via Zoom. And at the end, that she decided not to sign on with the same agreement that all the Premiers and the Prime Minister decided to sign on. So maybe you could share your thoughts on that.
Well, okay. Well, first of all, I mean, I think we can all agree that the Premier already had a scheduled holiday, so she was on her vacation.
Oh, okay.
She actually delayed that in order to do the meeting in Mar-a-Lago with President Trump, and then she went on her vacation. They called an unanticipated meeting of premiers and the Prime Minister, and she attended by Zoom, which we all do quite a bit in a lot of meetings. And I think she was present. She was aware of what was going on. She provided input in that meeting. I have no doubt about that. Then the question comes in, how come she did not sign the declaration? And then there was one point there, that issue that is, I think, a big concern for Albertans, and it's how fast and ready that certain parts of Canada seem to take relative to what sacrifice we should make for other parts of Canada. And especially when that sacrifice that is being proposed, I don't think is actually very productive in terms of negotiations with the United States or with Mr. Trump. So, she would say, look at, exports to oil and gas exports to the United States. It's not something that should be on the table on this issue. If for no other reason, then not only is it negative, potentially negative, well, it would be negative for our Alberta American friends, but it'd also be very negative for the rest of Canada. And I think it's a big problem that we have where many people across Canada and even in Alberta actually do not understand where and how our system is integrated in terms of energy and how it operates. So for example, most people don't recognize that the oil that goes from Alberta to Eastern Canada goes to the United States. Or that the biggest source of imported oil in Eastern Canada comes from the United States. And so are they aware how much the consequence they would have to pay if that happened? And the other part of it, of course, is we found ourselves in situations in Alberta where most of our oil is landlocked. We now have one pipeline that allows us to go to the coast, but there were many other projects, including, as the Premier mentioned, Canada East, the Canadian East pipeline that would go out from Alberta to the East Coast, and the Northern Gateway project that was cancelled by the Government of Canada for reasons that make to us here in Alberta any sense whatsoever. And so, because of such policies, we find ourselves to be highly vulnerable in Alberta of interruption with our trade with the United States. And that was something that was imposed upon us by people outside of Alberta. And so I think, it's fair to say, hold it, you put us into this vulnerable position, and we're not going to stand that we're going to have to pay a huge cost, because let's be very clear, if we were to attempt something like that, that would be devastating, absolutely devastating to Alberta. It'd be devastating for all of Canada, but it certainly would be devastating to us. And so I think this is something that shouldn't be on the table. I think that we have a complex negotiation, and I've talked earlier about what I think the U.S. administration and Mr. Trump himself are looking for from Canada. I don't think we need to ratchet up to this type of degree. I think we need to keep cooler heads and recognize that this raising up the stakes, if you will, on this negotiation is not in our best interest, and is not the way that we should be negotiating. So Premier Smith had her view on this. I, as the MLA for Calgary Fish Creek, agree with her view on this. And if other people, particularly other parts of Canada, don't agree, well, that's their right. But the Premier of Alberta, yes, she is a Canadian and a proud Canadian. I know that to be true, and so am I. But we disagree with the direction that the government of Canada and some of the other premiers think they want to take on this.
Okay, so still lots of uncertainty at this time.
There's certainly uncertainty, and like I mentioned before, I think that there's, people are getting very excited about some of the comments that Mr. Trump has made, and I understand that, but like I said, I go back to my own personal understanding of how the energy sector is connected between our two countries, and it just makes no sense that we would go down that road for both parties' interests. So why are we doing that?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for filling me in on that, because I mean, again, with that uncertainty, it is nice to see that there is still some individuals who believe that there still needs to be negotiations and discussions as this uncertainty lays ahead.
And I don't think, to add to that, trying to have a sensitive negotiation in the public sphere, playing to the press and others, and accentuating fears and other emotions is not necessarily the best way that I think we should be negotiating. In my experience, cooler heads should prevail. We should treat each other as good, close friends, as we have been. We may have disagreements over some things, but we don't want to maximize the disagreements or increase the threats. And I don't think that's conducive to coming over to an agreement among friends as to what is in our mutual benefit.
Okay, well, I guess we look forward to seeing what is going to unfold. And finally, though, I do want to ask, there is another legislature session coming up in the next couple of weeks here. Is there anything in particular you're looking forward to? I know this more than likely will be a hot topic here with Canada and the US relations, but is there anything in particular for Calgary Fish Creek you're looking forward to, or just in general with the session?
Well, I think the budget is going to be a big element coming forward, and because there's going to be so much uncertainty, because in part of the issue that we just discussed, if there is any disruption in the trade that we have with the United States in terms of oil and gas, it will have, particularly for Alberta, a huge implication as to what we can expect from revenues. And so we'll see how the provincial treasurer and the government of Alberta assigns probabilities and to catch up world oil price and volumes and US dollar, Canadian dollar FX, et cetera, to have significant implications for revenues. On the cost side, I think, as I mentioned, we have to do some things in terms of responding to the major population increase that we've received in Alberta and the apparent increase in class sizes and demands on our healthcare system. So I'll be looking for some recognition of that. Okay. We will continue to work on the restructuring of our healthcare system so that we can expect to see some legislation related to those that initiative. So I think those are the two big things that I'll be looking to see what happens in the next legislative session.
Okay, that's awesome. Well, again, thank you so much, Myles, MLA for Calgary Fish Creek, for letting me come by and answer some questions for me that I have. And we look forward to seeing what's going to happen in the near future.
Well, thank you for your very good questions.